Hello, and welcome to the Alpha Male Podcast, the podcast where we talk about what it means to be a man the right way, with God at the center, made in His very image, strong, dominant, and in control, and we don't apologize for it. Now, this episode will be part 2 on protecting life. On the first one, we went into very important topics like situational awareness, normalcy bias, contingency plans, and things like that. So if you haven't, I would give that one a listen, but you don't have to. You can listen to this on its own. This one is going to be on being armed, but not in the way you might think. I'm not going to talk about, the Glock 19 versus the SIG versus the Smith & Wesson. Do an entirely other podcast, if you're not aware, called Gunfighter Life on that kind of stuff. Today's podcast is going to be better than that, deeper than that, and more alpha than that. Let's get into the why. Why? Because this is the Alpha Male Podcast. It's your duty as an alpha male to protect and provide for those around you, women and children, and men who are not alpha males. You ought to see the truth that it is your duty, your responsibility to protect others, to protect life. And if you don't think that, perhaps this is the wrong podcast for you. Perhaps you should go find the Average Man podcast, because this is the Alpha Male Podcast. So if you haven't up to this point, really consider stepping up, girding your loins, proving yourself a man, being strong, protecting those around you who are weaker than you. Specifically, humans in His very own image. Human life is valuable and precious. More valuable than animals and plants. For the Bible says, for Jesus Himself says, for you are of more value than many sparrows. That life should be protected. And if you as an alpha male aren't going to step up, then who is? So hopefully I am, as they say, preaching to the choir. For Jesus said, let he who has no sword sell his cloak and buy one. So whether this is just a friendly reminder or a call to arms, if you haven't been, question why you are not armed and why you are not able to protect those around you or willing to protect those around you. Now, just to preface this, I believe no matter what kind of weapon you have, you should have a rudimentary, at least, knowledge of hand-to-hand combat. We did a whole episode here on the Alpha Male Podcast about that, about different forms of martial combat. You may want to go back and look that up, but realize that this is in addition to that. But let's concede that today, to have on us to protect life, the most logical and reasonable tool for an alpha male to have on him throughout his daily walk is a handgun. And why is that? Why a handgun? Not because a handgun is the most deadly of weapons, because it's the most efficient at stopping threats. In fact, it is none of those things. If you look at real-world statistics, a handgun is far less likely to stop a threat quickly than a shotgun or a rifle. And it's far harder to master. They are the hardest weapon to shoot out of. Shotguns, rifles. Handguns are harder to master. They're harder to be proficient with. So why a handgun? Well, because for most of us, we can't walk around with an AR-15 on our back all day or a shotgun in our hand all day. A handgun is a compromise, and know that going in. And I love the handgun. I do more practicing with a handgun, and I've won more competitions with a handgun than any other arm. But I like it because it is difficult, because it is challenging. I love the art of mastering the handgun. But just realize that going in, and don't kid yourself. Know the limitations of a handgun. Whether it's 9, 40, 45, whatever. Realize that from statistics that I've seen, about 80% of handgun wounds are not fatal. And realize that you don't shoot somebody to kill them. Your goal is to stop them from doing that bad behavior that had you shoot them in the first place. Whether they die or not is inconsequential to you. Whatever that behavior is that made you intervene to protect somebody else's life or your life, you're trying to stop that behavior. But I just say that to illustrate the limitations of a handgun. But that being said, that's the best thing that we have so far. It gives a well-armed citizen the ability to project force, greater force, and project it at a distance, which equals time and options. I'll say again, a handgun gives you the ability to project force, giving you time and options that you otherwise wouldn't have. And we're very blessed here in America right now to live in the golden age of handguns. I first started carrying a handgun day to day was just after I got out of the Marine Corps, shortly after I got out of the Marine Corps. There were far fewer options, even, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, especially 30 years ago than there are today. We kind of live in the golden age. Not only are handguns vastly more abundant and better options than there was then, it's also much easier to conceal carry in most places than it was back then. With that being said, don't get analysis paralysis on the handguns. I said I do a whole nother podcast about all the different nuances and this and that, and nerding out over this one versus that one. That's not what this podcast today is going to be about. I'll give you some things that I see as very important when choosing a handgun to protect your life or somebody else's life. Reliability. Reliability is obviously very important. For that reason, I say don't go after the next latest and greatest thing. I kind of have a rule on guns. If it's to protect life, then don't get it for at least 3 years. If it has an issue, if it has a reliability issue, and all big manufacturers, Glock, Smith & Wesson, I don't care who it is, you don't know that gun's reliable until it's been out and tested. So don't trust your life or other people's lives to it until it's been out for a while and been tested. Give it a couple years. Let some dude on YouTube shoot it and find out it has malfunctions. You don't need to find that out in the middle of a defensive shooting. So reliability and proven track record of reliability. And just because that gun model is reliable does not mean that your individual one is going to be reliable. Think of gun makes and models kind of like dog breeds. They give you rough characteristics, but your gun is an individual and you have to know it and train with it as an individual. German Shepherds, for instance, in general, are good police dogs. Not every German Shepherd is suited as a police dog. Glocks in general are reliable. Not every Glock is reliable. That's what I mean by using that generality. The next one is concealability. Now, right off the bat, we carry a handgun because it's concealable. But concealable for me is different than concealable would be for you. My concealed carry gun, my carry gun, is far different than my wife's carry gun. My day-to-day right now concealed carry gun is a Sig Sauer M17. My wife's is a Glock 42. And you don't have to know what those are, but one is way, way bigger than the other. Concealability really depends on you. Except my day-to-day right now is the M17. But one of my favorite go-to carry guns is a Smith & Wesson J-frame 357 Magnum. It's much smaller, much easier to conceal. Next characteristic has to be concealability. Because if you can't conceal it, you really can't carry it. And if you can't carry it, better off with a smaller, say less capable gun on paper that you have on you than the gun that you left at home because you were just going to the gas station at night or just going out to grab milk or whatever the thing is. Concealability. That's your next factor that I would consider. It doesn't matter how reliable the gun, it doesn't matter how well it shoots, how accurate it is, what great sights it has, what a great trigger it has. If you don't have it on you during a gunfight, for all intents and purposes to you, it does not exist anymore. So concealability of that arm, that handgun. The next important characteristic I would say is it easy to maintain? And most modern handguns are, but some are not. They're not easy to disassemble, they're not easy to take care of. This really depends on you. If you're that kind of person that never cleans anything, never gets his oil changed, stuff like that, maybe a Glock is a better choice for you. If you're willing to put the time and effort and maintenance in, if you like to tune stuff and tinker with stuff, perhaps a 1911 is a better fit for you, or 1911 derivative. And since we just discussed, Glock and 1911s, know anything about guns, that'll probably spark images of the 9 versus 45 debate. And here's what I'm going to tell you. I don't care. I routinely carry a 9mm. I routinely carry a 45 ACP. I routinely carry a 357 Magnum. But statistically speaking, the difference is really irrelevant. Pick a good, reliable, concealable handgun that you can maintain. And here's the next big thing. More important than the physical thing is get out there and train with it. Be proficient with it. Lots of people, lots of men go out and buy a gun and they take it to the range and they shoot it once and leave it in a box in their house. Again, this is not the average male podcast. If you're going to carry a gun, expect to protect your life and other people's lives with it, you ought to take that responsibility seriously. And you ought to train with it. Go out and shoot the gun, shoot it with your carry loads. Be proficient with it. And even if you can't get out to the range a lot, dry fire. Dry fire, if you don't know what that is, look it up. But dry fire is more important than live fire. Once you know that the handgun works and works with the ammo that you have. You can unload your gun and safely practice drawing, a good smooth trigger press, and close quarters combat drills without wasting ammo, wasting money. You'll in general be better if you do that dry fire consistently than going to the range every once in a while. Shooting is a perishable skill. It doesn't matter that I was a state pistol champion, years ago if I don't practice. It's a perishable skill. Better off doing a few minutes every day of dry fire, or a few times a week of dry fire, than you are, going to the range for an entire day once or twice a year. Perishable skill like going to the gym, like a bench press. How good would you be at bench press if you bench pressed for an entire day, once or twice a year? Versus if you did it for a few minutes every day, did one or two max sets of push-ups every day, or a couple of times a week. Shooting is like that, is a perishable skill. It's a responsibility. If you're an alpha male, I hope you consider it your duty. And like many things in life as a man, as an alpha male, it requires a little bit of time and dedication. There are times when you don't feel like it, but here's a newsflash: as an alpha male, as a human being on this earth, the world doesn't revolve around you and what you want and how you feel. So step up as a man, be able to protect your life and the lives of those around you. And give it some dedication, give it some practice, give it some time. Put down the social media for a few minutes a day. Turn off that news cycle that's been going on and on and on about the same scare tactic for days and days and days. Pick up your handgun and practice with it. Stand ready. Be ready as a man. Be well armed. As Theodore Roosevelt said, walk softly, carry a big stick. Don't go out looking for trouble. We talked about in the part 1, situational awareness, pattern recognition, avoidance. But if you're going to stop an evil man with a gun, you had better be a good man with a gun. And I like guns. I can talk about guns for hours. I can nerd out about this thing over that thing. Striker fire, polymer guns versus double single action metal frame guns, and bore axis and twist rates, and 115 grain 9mm versus 147 grain 9mm. Like I said, there's another podcast for that. Pick, a Glock 19, a Smith & Wesson M&P, a Sig Sauer P series, a 38 or 357 Magnum revolver, and a good holster, good ammo selection, and practice with it and train with it. And be a well-armed alpha male, not because you're scared, because you're ready and willing to protect women and children and those weaker than you. Like I said, I hope that this is just a reminder for you that you are already doing these things, and this is just an encouragement for you. But if not, I hope that it's a call to arms for you. Like I said, we live in the golden age of handguns and ammo. Ammo's not as easy to get as it was a few years ago. The amount of good defensive loads that are available today, much better than it was decades ago, and the reliability and affordability of handguns is far better than it's been. There's tons of trainers out there. Sadly, I know from firsthand experience we've been through decades of war in this country. Or I should say decades of sending our young men off to war in this country. That means there's a lot of good instructors with good real-world firsthand experience. We kind of live in one of the golden ages of training. A great time where in most places you can get a concealed carry permit. Again, let he who has no sword sell his cloak and buy one. Jesus tells his disciples to be armed. If you ever see the Lord God of hosts in the Bible, that's the God of angel armies. Kind of a word we don't use much anymore, but that means the commander of angel armies. Angels are recorded as having swords. Don't make excuses. There are reasons if you can't have a handgun for whatever actual reason and not an excuse, like I don't feel like it or I don't have the time. In that case, I would say look at other weapons. Look at a good, solid, combat-capable knife. Just like the handgun, I don't care if it's a K-bar or a mini K-bar or a CRKT M16 or a Buck 110 Slim. It's a good, usable utility tool / defensive weapon. I still carry one of like a knife that's capable of that as a backup to my handgun for a lot of reasons. They're different tools. That's all you can have. The same things apply. Get it, practice with it, know how to use it. Be an uphill fight to go against a guy with an AK-47 with a pocket knife, but it's sure a whole lot better than barehanded. But more important than the tool is courage to face and overcome fear, willingness, a sense of duty and responsibility as a man to protect others. And again, if you don't feel that sense of duty, that responsibility as an alpha male to do that, perhaps this is the wrong podcast for you. Perhaps the Average Joe Sports Talk podcast is more towards what you should be listening to than the Alpha Male podcast. Are you willing? Are you strong enough? Are you brave enough? Are you alpha male enough to step up and do that? So if you want to know more about specifics on the guns and the gear and stuff, check out Gunfighter Life. Check out a few other episodes of the Alpha Male podcast. We did whole ones on handguns. With that, something I've been doing recently is a tactical tip is a thanks for staying tuned to the end of the episode. Tactical tip of the day is if you can't shoot good slow, you're probably not going to shoot good fast. Hitting the target is what counts. Practice the fundamentals and always go back to the fundamentals. A master at shooting, especially a master at handgun shooting, is a man that continually remasters the fundamentals. I say again, if you can't shoot good slow, you won't shoot good fast. Some advice I got as a young Marine that always stuck with me. Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. Don't just go to the range and turn money into noise. Unless you're just going to have fun. Shooting can be fun. I'm not saying there's never a time and a place for that. But if you're talking about training, turning money into noise does not equal training. Just pulling a trigger 1,000 times is not necessarily going to make you better. In fact, it could make you worse. Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. Always go back to the fundamentals. Always seek mastery of the fundamentals. With that, a tactical verse of the day. Deuteronomy chapter 20. When you go out to battle against your enemies and see horses and chariots and people more numerous than you, do not be afraid of them. For the Lord your God is with you, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. So it shall be when you are on the verge of battle that the priest shall approach and speak to the people. And he shall say to them, Hear, O Israel, today you are on the verge of battle with your enemies. Do not let your heart faint. Do not be afraid. Do not tremble or be terrified because of them. For the Lord your God is he who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to save you. With that, men, I'll say thanks for listening. Check out Good Shepherd Training for more if you want to support the podcast. GoodShepherdTraining.com. Again, that's GoodShepherdTraining.com. Trying a new format here. With that, I'm going to plug in the bio at the very end. If you've never heard the bio, I want to give it a listen, or if you want to hear it again. If not, men, get out there, prove yourself a man, be strong and dominant, and have a blessed day. First and foremost, I am a servant of God, preacher, a fisher of men. God is number one in my life, and everything that I do in this podcast is no different, and I don't apologize for that. A little bit about me in the background. I grew up, I guess what you would consider a heathen. Didn't grow up a Christian, but I grew up in the southeastern United States, what most would consider very poor. Hunting and fishing and shooting. Joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. After my combat tours in Iraq, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in law enforcement for several years in LAPD. I worked patrol assignments and more specialized assignments, where by God's grace, He got me through some nasty places in this world of war zones and some of the nastiest streets in the country. Not because I am better, because God chose to have mercy on me and had a purpose for me, and I'm thankful for that. After my time in law enforcement, I was a private contractor for federal government, for a 3-letter government agency I won't specify, doing private contracting work. I'm very much involved in guns and gunfighting. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. I should say my primary MOS is in both branches of the military or infantry, as of one sort or another. Specialized infantry in the Marine Corps and an MOS that no longer exists. I started competition shooting even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I won my first gold medal even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I've been blessed by God with the talents He's given me to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. I've won most of my competitions in rifle and pistol, but I've also competed in archery and shotgun and even muzzleloader, knife throwing, hatchet throwing. I've competed in all that. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide. Like I said, I grew up hunting and fishing and shooting. I've done it to put meat on the table because I like to put food on the table with the talents God's given me. I don't apologize for that. I've done it as a professional hunter and guide. I've slain all manner of beast and guided for all manner of beast. Bear and wolf and elk and deer, mule deer, whitetail deer. I've slain ram and fallow deer and countless animals. And I don't apologize for that either. FBI certified, firearms instructor, NRA, and a bunch of other 3-letter government agency certifications. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Psalm 144. I've been blessed to be the commander of a tactical team, an SRT, special response team, in a large metropolitan area, where our primary job was to stop active shooters. But again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, called by God to share the good news, preacher, a fisher of men.